We made it.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Never better. Never better.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't know what was going on for a second, but
Oh, install Zoom. We had to reinstall Zoom, and I've got my web guy here with me. Otherwise, I'm completely helpless. So
well, we made it. I think
we're good. We're good to go.
I feel like my Wi-Fi was crapping out on me for a second, which was another reason why it was being weird. But we made it. I see you have your Bob Seger records, your Jackson Brown records there in the background.
I got it all. I got it
There
all.
you go. There you go. Those are two of my favorite records, especially that Jackson record. That's a really good record.
When I first got a record player, that that album and all of his albums, and I listened to all the time. And Dan Fogelsberg, old school stuff.
Oh yeah, one of Jackson's good friends is a writing partner of mine. His name is J.D. Souther, and we write a lot of
Really?
songs
Okay,
together.
I know who he is. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a good guy. Well, thank you for being here, man. I really appreciate
I'm happy to be anywhere at this point.
it. I
I'm
get
good.
that.
I'm good.
Well, how has life changed for you since all of this started?
When you say started, you mean chainsaw or the pandemic
Well,
or
the pandemic.
combination? It's it's been a tough haul. I mean, I'm basically like in a perpetual state of quarantining.
Mhm.
I don't see friends, I don't see family as much as I'd like to, and hopefully it's going to come to an end fairly soon.
Fingers
Hopefully,
crossed. I mean, it's looking up. It's looking up.
yeah, yeah.
It. I hope so. I mean, I hope I haven't duped myself into believing that it's looking up, but I think it's looking up.
I think so. I think so.
Now, when I reached out to you and you hit me back and said that you watched The Voice, it was a very flattering moment for me, knowing that you watched the show and you remembered me and all that kind of stuff. So I have to ask, why The Voice? What about The Voice keeps you coming back to?
I like the talent. I like the way they produce it. I like the interaction, with the stars. They just come across as really, likable, and that they really care about all the contestants. Whether they win, whether they lose, they make a good case, for all of them. And then particularly the songs that you sang, I liked every one of them. So those were like
Okay.
favorites of mine. And I didn't realize that you're just a teenager when you're on that show, and yet you seem like an old soul in terms of how you carry yourself and your voice and everything. So it was like a double treat for me for you to reach out to me, where you weren't even born when this movie, came
Right.
out. And who would have thought that like almost 50 years later, it still carries the weight that it does. And I was watching a documentary on the Bee Gees actually last night, and then I realized we're like the Bee Gees of horror. We've been around in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and now we're coming around again. So it's like, and it kind of tied into one of the reviews of this movie was a guy that referred to me as this 30-year-old disco dude. So here it is, a cross between Texas Chain Saw Massacre and Saturday Night Fever, which
There you
kind of
go.
seems the way my bobblehead is coming across. So it's a total goof. It's a total goof.
Well, like you said, it's been almost 50 years. You guys just had a virtual cast reunion. All the surviving members of the cast, all the surviving members of the crew, all got back together with Joe Bob Briggs, one of my favorite people. What was that like? Do you guys do that often?
No, this was the first time. And I had done a couple of these Zoom meetings with different people that have reached out to me. And I think I mentioned to a fellow named Chase that this could be a good thing to do while we're still, vertical.
Hmm.
I mean, we're a vanishing breed. There's no way around this, So every day above ground is a good day for me, and I guess they liked it and they put it together. And I learned a lot of stuff from listening to the crew, that
Right.
I know, and then just, I mean, sadly, some of the key people aren't around, like Gunnar and and uh, and Marilyn and even Paul Partain,
Yeah.
who we hated in the movie, but was the nicest guy you could imagine. And even Bob Burns, who was the art director or prop guy, because that movie, the whole look of it is due to him. So it's sad that a lot of these people are no longer with us.
For sure. Now with Paul, I was watching the reunion. I heard that he tended to almost stay in character most of the time. So when do you think you got to know the real Paul, when Paul wasn't being Franklin? Was it during the film or after?
No, I didn't know him. I didn't know him at all. Actually, I met him at my first convention, horror convention, and
Uh-huh.
he sat next to me. And it turned out he was the nicest guy. He was just a completely different. That's how good of an actor he was. You know
Right.
what I mean? We all hated him. You know, and I think I applauded when he got killed. I mean, I'm kidding, but it was just that kind of a thing where nobody liked him. So that's how good of an actor he was.
When was that convention? How long ago was that you
I think the
were
first
sitting
one
with
that
him?
I did was in 2003, and I had been actually a little bit apprehensive about doing them because I literally thought I'd be meeting serial killer, wannabes, which wasn't the case. Yeah, I mean they got tattoos and stuff, but they're the nicest people, and they were so respectful, toward me. I guess I was like fresh meat, for these type of things. I hadn't been on the scene yet, so. But and I'm continue to be bewildered as how nice the people are that they love this movie.
Yeah,
You know,
I go to conventions and I walk around and I'm like, whoa, I think I may be blessed that I don't look like anybody else here, because there is a perception. It's like these are tough people, tattoos, piercings, mohawks, all that
you
stuff.
name it. I mean, they've got tattoos of Leatherface,
Yeah,
on them and stuff like that. So and yet they're the nicest people. They want to take pictures with you. They want you to, sign, and they've got memorabilia. I mean, they got everything.
yeah.
So
Have you ever seen a Jerry tattoo?
not yet, but
It's
I'm
coming.
hoping that the bobblehead is going to be the turnaround, especially a
There you go.
talking bobblehead.
A talking bobblehead Jerry.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got to get one of those. Speaking of memorabilia, Texas Chainsaw, I think is the DVD I own the most copies of. I
Well,
think I have steel books, Blu-rays, old special editions. I don't know what it was about that movie, but the first time I saw it, I felt like I was watching things happen. Like a documentary is how it feels, and that's what is so terrifying about it. But pre-Chainsaw, you met Tobe on eggshells.
yeah, that was I guess the first movie that I was in. And at the time I was married, and my wife at the time, my son was like 8 months old in it. And actually, I think you could Google it, and you can watch Eggshells.
Yeah.
And it was like cinema verite, which means there's no lines, there's no script. They just said, Alan, we're coming to your house. At that time, I was doing social work, and it was a
Mhm.
young couple, David and Amy, that the movie kind of revolved around. And so they came to my house and shot a scene there, and I guess they liked me, or they kept adding stuff for me to do, adding scenes. And so because of Eggshells, I think unfortunately only about 30 people saw that movie, so it didn't really do anything. But when they wrote Chainsaw, they came to me with the script and said, we'd like you to play this character. So I didn't really audition for it. They gave me the script. I read it. I said, count me in. I liked it. I mean, I was engrossed reading it. I couldn't put it down.
Mhm.
And so I said, okay, I'm your guy. If you want me, you got me.
There you
So
go.
that's
Do you
that's was how it happened.
do you remember your first impression of Toby?
He kind of reminded me a little of Eric von Stroheim, that kind of
Yeah.
guy, with the cigar. I can't do his impression, but he was always actually really nice to me. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? There's a darker side to him, but he was always very, very nice to me. And so I met him, and then we, did that, and then, said, we'll do it. And I mean, it wasn't a bad shoot for me because it was only, I think, around 6 weeks. And so it worked around, I was doing a camp for underprivileged or disadvantaged youngsters. And so they worked around my schedule. And I didn't really have to deal with being in that house, for 24 or 30 hours where putrefying bones and people throwing up. I mean, my stuff was mainly outside, in the van, and up until when I get killed, and even then I got myself all worked up. I sat outside, that I had them blindfold me. So it would be really the first time that I saw Leatherface in full regalia, which, I mean, it was frightening. I mean, so much so like that when they shot me, I started screaming and running out of the house. They had to corral me and say, great scream, but you got to wait till he's in the frame, with the hammer, so we had to do it a few times. And what people don't know, I think I mentioned it maybe once before, when that hammer comes down, two of the guys, the grips or whatnot, had me by the belt loop, so they pulled me down as their hammer, was hitting me, because, we're talking 45 years later, I'm still getting headaches. So it was a brutal shot.
Do you remember exactly how many times you had to do it?
I don't remember, but I think it was probably at least three times, 2 or 3 times.
Now, the blindfold, was that your idea, or was that?
That was my idea. That was my nod to the Stanislavski methods, which I know nothing about. I just like throwing out words like
that. Now, in terms of horror, was that anything that you were interested in or saw and had an effect on you, or did you just walked into it?
The only effect it had is that after that scene, with the hitchhiker, I said, I don't pick up any hitchhikers after that that scene, and which is true. I never picked up another hitchhiker.
Now,
after that,
you drove the van. You were driving the van.
You that, I mean, I actually had to say my lines and drive at the same time, which unheard of.
Well, there's a lot going on in the van while you're doing that. So I imagine
it's unbelievable.
Distracting.
I mean, here it is. It's Texas, and it's 100 degrees. I mean, it's Africa hot. That's how hot it is. And there's us, and then there's the sound man. Tobe with a cigar, probably. All the windows are rolled up. I mean, it's nuts, and yet it looks good.
It looks great.
Good.
How many people are in the van?
I think there was the 5 of us, and then the sound guy, Ted Nicolai, kind of looks like Emo Phillips now after all these years, and Tobe and Wayne, I think 3. So I think there was like 8 people in the van.
Wow. I mean, and that's not that big of a van either.
No.
I mean,
no.
That's you're tight packed. You're packed tight packed.
Yeah.
In sweltering heat. I mean, that's amazing. Well, so you talked a bit about it, but the filming conditions for everybody else, most everybody else, for Marilyn, Ed, and Jim, and Gunnar, were horrible. And, like you said, there's that infamous, depending on who you ask, like 24, 25-hour day of just being stuck into the house. So I imagine you count your blessings every so often for not having to be in that house that long.
I said, it was a walk in the park for me compared to what these guys, had to do. I mean, it was just after several takes in the van, it's 110 degrees. The girls got out and they go into the trailer, and then they'd cool off, and Dottie Pearl, the hairstylist, would, fix their makeup and do stuff like that. And I said, hey, they got a good thing going. I'm going to try it myself. So after one of the takes, I kind of eased out of the van. I go into the trailer, I sit down, and they come running over to me. They said, what are you doing here? I said, I thought I could, get the makeup or whatever. There's nothing we can do for you. So that was my, my dealing with the makeup people.
Well, there you go. What was Tobe like as a director? Was he hands-on? Was he given a lot of direction?
Not really. He left us alone a lot. I think there was some talking about the idea when we got into astrology. I didn't know anything. I didn't know a Libra from a Sagittarius or a unicorn, a Capricorn. I didn't know any of that. So he worked with me, on that. And then there was a scene upstairs at that the old house, and he just said, just just ad lib and stuff like. And actually, a lot of the dialogue are some of my own lines, which
Mhm.
have turned out after all these years to be signature lines. Like it's on my T-shirt. Hey, you guys, quit goofing on me. That's my stuff. You can't write that.
Right.
So, but it came out. They liked it, and it's worked after all these years.
Well, my favorite piece of acting in the entire movie is you and Marilyn upstairs in the old house, and she's like, "Oh, my grandfather died," and you say, What happened?"
Yeah.
He died. That's amazing, and you guys had such chemistry. What was working with Marilyn like?
Well, the sad part of it is that I didn't really feel like we had the chemistry that I would
Mhm.
have liked. I mean, she's beautiful,
Yeah.
and I mean, nowadays you can't have movies without there's some romance or sexual things going on. There was Zippo, you know what I mean? And that's funny because there was no script for that. There was no
Mhm.
lines. They just said, whatever you do, just so the fact that you like it, I mean, that really makes me feel good
It's the
because it was
best
just
part of the whole movie.
it's just the dialogue. Because if you see, there's no real going on between us,
Mhm.
except at the end when I'm going down to meet my fate, and I said, no, and I say to her, you better stay here. You could see her responses. She's not happy about that,
Right.
where she's left with Franklin, by herself. I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Right. I mean, that's a character. Toby really like pioneered the way of creating a character that you just want to die, that you're just waiting for them to die.
Well, as I said to a gunner, we were driving. I had a bed and breakfast in Luling, Texas, some years ago, and he had just written his book, and we were going down to see the plays and whatnot. And he said, "What did you think?" I said, "I think we were basically fodder, and
Hmm.
we were just there to serve the purpose of dying,
Right.
and yeah, that was it, So that's how it was. So he didn't really, give us all that much, But there were a couple of times when he called me, he pulled me aside and left me there. No, I'm kidding. But he would just say a couple of things or whatnot that helped me. So and then I saw him actually a couple of years before he passed away
Mhm.
at the showing here in Austin at the Alamo Draft House of Eggshells. And I saw him, he was in the aisle, and he was, again, very cordial. And he said, hey, I hope we can get together. Sadly, it didn't.
Now, I'm very actually the first person I met in the genre who very dear friends with is Caroline Williams, who's the lead in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And from, hearing one, you talk about Toby's directing style, but two, also the entire reunion, it sounded like he really grew into his own in the years after making this movie and, learned how to be um, a director because the best thing about Texas Chainsaw is it feels all like the happiest accident. It's like it the stars aligned, especially with Danny Pearl. I think it's the most beautifully shot horror movie
Yeah,
ever.
yeah, I agree. I agree. It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. And it's like, I think Toby knew what he wanted.
Mhm.
He knew what shots he knew. He kept us apart. I mean, there was no getting together with the bad guys and whatnot.
Yeah.
And again, one of my favorite scenes is the scene at the gas station. And I think I mentioned this,
Mhm.
during one of the takes when Jim Seadow comes over to the van. We got no gas and whatnot. And I inadvertently hit the windshield wiper, and it splashed all the dirty, soapy water down his face. And he's trying to deliver his lines, and Kirk, Bill Vale, and myself, we lost it. I mean, we were done for the day. So much so, at one of the takes, Toby is smiling. He wasn't smiling by the end of the day. He was so happy that he just walked off the set, and Kim
Okay.
Henkel had to finish it. We were toast. How do you deal with that?
Right. Well, I mean, and once you lose it, it's it's
It's
gone.
done.
When you start
Yeah,
laughing, it's hard to get through
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
I
yeah.
always used to make my mom would always want to record me around the house of just, singing songs or whatever. And we would get to giggling and we would always start over and we could never get past
Yeah.
the first
Yeah.
10 seconds because it's once something's funny, it's funny forever. Um, do you have a favorite shot in the film? I mean, my favorite is definitely of you and the sun setting, walking down to the
Yeah,
house. I think it's
I agree.
gorgeous.
And they waited for the right time, and there I am, heading to my fate, with the sun. I like that, and I like the shot of them when he's coming to the van, and I'm looking like, what the hell is? What do you mean you got no gas? What? And have that kind of befuddled, perplexed look on my face.
I mean, it's incredible. I mean, from the first shot, it's gorgeous. I mean, and it's hard to believe that I would call a decomposing corpse on a whatever that thing is gorgeous, but
Yeah,
it's gorgeous.
yeah,
And he really just knew how to shoot everything, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's held up as well as it's held up over the years. And like you mentioned earlier as well, you guys did all your own stunts. You got pulled down by your belt loop. Did Paul roll down the hill at the
I
beginning?
believe
Did he do
so.
that?
Yeah, but I wasn't there for that shot, and that's still a sore point for me. And
Mhm.
that's Ron Bozeman, who was the producer of the movie. They borrowed my shirt for that movie because they didn't want to pay me extra. I don't know what the deal was. They borrowed my shirt, and that's a long shot, and I never got that shirt back.
Oh
And
no.
now that shirt would be worth a lot of money. It's an archival shirt, and whatever. What are you gonna do? What are you
What
gonna do?
on top of that, it's just a great shirt in general. It's the best shirt in the whole film. The best shirt
And I'm
in
trying to
cinema
find out.
history.
Yeah, and I'm trying to see if we could find a pattern. And I think we're getting close, but I think it was in the '70s, and I think I got it at an Indian boutique here in
Yeah.
Austin. But
So that was your shirt.
that's my shirt. Everything. My bell bottoms, my glasses. In fact, I just visited my ophthalmologist who recommended bifocals for me. So I think I'm going to go retro and I'm going to get those glasses again.
Go
Hexagonally.
right back.
I'll be ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille.
There you go. Now, another thing I loved hearing about in the reunion was you guys started talking about getting paid, and there was a deal of if you didn't take money up front and you took less money up front, you would get a percentage of the film. And almost everybody answered it except for you. So I have to know, did you take a percentage of the film?
Percentage, although I mean, I would have taken a ham sandwich back then, and it would have been okay. But yeah, and then the real massacre took place after the movie,
Hmm.
with the mafia being the distributors. Because I would cut out articles, Variety, and I would see chainsaw with a bullet. I mean, I thought, hey, I hit the brass ring. How many shots do you get at this? This is my ticket. You won't see me on a corner. We'll work for food. I have a shot at this, and I had a percentage. And then after all this time, you get a check for like a McDonald's sandwich. I said, there's something wrong with this picture. And that's what happened was the mafia took most of the money. But over the years, we have gotten some money, and then and that this will live forever. I'll be long gone. I've got grandkids now; they couldn't care less. Yeah, when they get a little older, they'll realize, that I was in this movie. But that's it. But the percentage, over the years has helped out. It doesn't hurt.
Right. Yeah, it's the story of the distribution of the film and the mafia being involved is,
A
you know,
nightmare.
the, a nightmare, but perhaps maybe the only appropriate tail end to what kind of movie this is.
Yeah, yeah. It all fits together. It all fits.
Um, did you did you I mean, you said you got to see him a couple years before he passed, but was there any contact between you and Toby after the film wrapped, or did everybody kind of go their separate ways?
Yeah, we went our separate ways. Yeah.
And I imagine that was probably true for the rest of the cast and probably until, 15, 20 years ago when
I think
conventions.
there was bad feelings actually toward Tobe, maybe misplaced or whatnot. He just wasn't a very communicative guy.
Yeah.
So, but I have stayed in touch with Kim, who wrote the movie,
Yeah.
and I refer to him as the Sam Elliott of horror. He's got his own way of talking if you listen to him, and really bright guy. And we've become friendly over the years and stuff. He's all of the people. I mean, I'm real
Right.
close with Bill Vale, Kirk in the movie. We're in touch. At least once or twice a month.
Uh-huh.
And even the hitchhiker, we go back a long ways, and
Yeah.
he's a trip. And I mean, just watching him, with that stain on his face, and the scabs that were made from raisins. I mean, it's a whole other ballgame there.
He's horrifying. What do you remember your first impression of the film when you saw it for the first time?
Well, I actually went to see if I'm really in this movie,
Mhm.
and so I went to see the coming attractions at it's now the Alamo off of Anderson Lane. I think it was the Village 4. And I saw, and then I saw myself on screen, and I ended up running out of the theater screaming. I mean, I was so freaked out.
Uh-huh.
But it just happened. And then sometime later, I took my son, who was like 5 at the time, just to see his dad, not in the crazy place, crazy scenes. And that was like 47 years ago. He just saw a little bit, and he's still in weekly therapy. So that movie had on it.
Did you find yourself with the controversy with the film? I mean, it wasn't necessarily considered high class cinema. Were you going out and telling people, "Oh, I was in Texas Chain Saw Massacre," or did you kind of keep it
Absolutely. And I was doing social work. I never said a word to people, that I'm in this, that I'm in this movie until later, when all of a sudden I started going to these conventions and found out that, wow, people love this movie. And I mentioned this in the reunion. I grew up in New York. I'm from the Bronx. So
Mhm.
there's a kid from the Bronx in the movie The Texas Chain Saw Massacre. And I used to read this guy. He was a critic, Archer Winston, and he would review movies. And I, riding home on the D train, I would read his reviews. When he got to the chainsaw movie, Texas Chainsaw, instead of giving it stars, he said it owed stars. That's how bad he hated this movie. And I didn't
Is-
really know that much either, because Toby did ask me a couple of times to come in and look at the rushes. And I did. And he said, well, what do you think? How could I improve the movie? I said, have the seats facing away from the screen. So that told you what I knew. So
Right.
I was in the dark. What I think turned it around for this movie was the opening, that scrolling with John
Uh-huh.
Larroquette as the narrator, and the change to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I thought that was brilliant. And in the
Right.
editing, I think they pulled it together. And to me, that's what made it
Right. It was
incredible.
originally going to be called Leatherface and then
Yeah.
Head
Or Head
Cheese.
Cheese was another name.
Yeah.
Was
And then
another word
Texas
title.
Chainsaw Massacre. How iconic. I mean, it just rolls off the tongue. I mean, and you would have, grown up in the generation of the tail end of Universal monsters in terms of horror, which is what would have been popular on the tail end of all of that. And now, you are in a film that has created the 20th, 21st, back into the 20th century, 21st century Universal monsters. I mean, these are the Leatherface, Jason, Freddy Krueger, Chucky. These are our modern Universal monsters. So that has to feel somewhat good.
It's like the three tenors. You
Yeah.
got Leatherface, you got Freddy, whatever the other guy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to feel good. Now, you told this story on the reunion, but I loved the story. And anybody that didn't see the reunion, I want them to be able to hear it here. But your parents saw this movie in a porn house, in a porn theater.
Double feature of Chainsaw, and I said, I think it was Debbie Does Dallas or Debbie Does Dialysis. So this is It might have been Debbie Does Dialysis for that matter. And
And their
then,
impression of it was,
and then when they got home, they called me immediately to make sure I was still above ground. Yeah.
that's amazing. I have friends in the genre that have been like, my parents went to see my film, and they, called me immediately and said, "Are you okay? Oh my God, are you okay? I can't believe, oh my God." Like, it's amazing that's a common thread, an initial reaction. How often do you see Texas Chainsaw?
How often what?
How often do you watch the film?
I'm maybe once a year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, actually at my house over Halloween, one of my tenants is just a huge fan, and she said she would be honored if I would, be at. It was an outdoor showing
Uh-huh.
on my garage door, and all of a sudden there was a lot of people that showed up for this, and they were very, very careful about, the wore masks and stuff, and
Right.
we did a question and answer, after the movie and stuff like that. So I still, I mean, I get a kick out of people wanting to know just the ins and outs of this movie. And
Right.
I mean, people ask me, did you, how come you didn't do anything after that? I said, what are you going to do? It's hard to top that. And I wanted to leave going out on top, then
Right.
go from there to boom, have a major fall. Although I did shoot a couple of scenes for another movie with a fellow by the name of Eagle Pennell, who was a young director, brilliant guy, and
Mm-hmm.
he passed away a few years after. But we shot a couple of scenes, and then he changed it to using only one vignette, and it turned into the Last Night at the Alamo.
Yes.
I think, and it was a great movie. And
Yeah.
I think
Eagle
Lou
Pennell.
Perryman is in that, and Lou was one of the guys that pulled me down,
Yes.
in the scene.
And then went on to play a
Yeah,
part in Texas
right.
Chainsaw
It
2.
too. Yeah,
Eagle Pennell is a great Texas filmmaker.
yes,
Uh,
yeah,
Texas has such a wonderful film community that we don't talk about enough. We hear
right,
about LA, New York. They shoot a lot of films in Vancouver. They got a lot in Georgia, but Texas filmmaking has always been a big thing. And we don't hear much about it, and especially about people like Eagle Pennell, who's a great filmmaker.
yeah.
Now, doing the reunion, you're at home, you're watching the film. You're Could you see everybody else when you were
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
it? And
yeah,
so you're looking at the screen with all of these people you had this experience with, what, 47 years ago now? Um, some of them, aren't there. What is that feeling like?
it's a sad. I mean, it's a sadness there that they're not there, to share in this
Mhm.
experience, or that we couldn't do it maybe 5 years ago.
Right.
When Elite Gunner was alive, and I think Sally and Marilyn was still alive.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Paul passed away sometime earlier, and Bob Burns also passed away, and a lot of people passed away from cancer.
Hmm.
Gunner had pancreatic cancer, and you know,
Yeah. It's tough. And Jim passed away probably 20 something years ago.
yeah.
I think at this point it's been a second.
And he was a
Uh,
nice guy. I mean, but I didn't really know him.
right.
One of the extras in the movie that I did get to know is John Henry Falk.
Hmm.
He's in one of the open at the cemetery. And as a
Yeah.
kid, I used to listen to him on radio. He
Hmm.
was blackballed. I mean, this guy was a raconteur. He was just an incredibly bright guy. So that was it for me, just meeting him, going on
Right.
location with him. So, I mean, again, it's hard to bring back some of those memories. It's almost 50 years ago,
Right.
so
Right. Now,
great. Great.
there's a great special feature on one of the editions of Texas Chainsaw that comes with it's a disc on its own of Tobe Hooper and William Friedkin, director of The French Connection, The Exorcist, To Live and Die in L.A., Cruising, all these
Yeah.
amazing films. Doing a Q&A at the New Art here in Los Angeles, great single screen theater. And William Friedkin says, I think this is the scariest movie I've ever seen. It's the scariest movie ever made. Director of The Exorcist, widely known as the scariest movie ever made. Martin Scorsese is a big fan of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
He was
All
that
these
fine.
wonderful people.
He's watching Travis Bickle. I didn't is watching Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
You know, in that movie.
Now, do you have? I mean, what's it like hearing all of these, insanely influential filmmakers, insanely influential people in just the world? What's it like hearing them talk about being fans of this film you were part of?
It feels great.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just I'm beside myself. Because most people don't know I'm in the movie and whatnot. So here it is in the twilight of my career, as the sun is setting. To get, it's like I've taken that 15 minutes, and then now I've extended it.
right.
45, 50 years. Who gets to do that? So
Yeah,
it's a great.
yes,
I'm sorry that my parents are not alive to get a kick out of what's happened or to
right.
enjoy it.
Now, 47 years later, almost 50 years, we'll go ahead and round up. How has your relationship with the film evolved over the years?
Oh, I embrace it now.
Hmm.
Maybe before I would run away from it or wouldn't talk about it. Now I'm happy to discuss it because I mean, in a way we were pioneers. We were doing stuff with virtually no money, and in terrible conditions in that house and whatnot, and on the different roads and stuff like that. And so after this many years, how many movies are like that people are still talking about it, and it's
Right.
just kind of grown. I mean, here you're not even in your 20s, and it's a favorite of yours. So
Yeah.
it's like a movie that was actually shot in 73, came out in 74, and here we are in 2020, and it's still talked about as the number one. I mean,
Yeah.
the original, the OG. I'm the OG. The
You are
original.
the OG. Yeah.
The OG.
I mean, everyone in popular culture always mentions Halloween as being one of the first slashers. And then they're like, no, 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 there was Black Christmas. And I'm like, well, Texas Chainsaw predated Black Christmas by a couple of months. So you guys may have very well been the original slasher. I
Yeah,
mean, Herschel Gordon Lewis was making these gross blood feast and 2000 Maniacs in the 60s, but if we're going by 70s cinema, I think you guys were the very first slasher film ever, which, for better or for worse, has pioneered all of these films and influenced all of these films.
yeah,
Um, it has got to be amazing. I always ask this towards the end of the interviews, especially with the horror folks, because the business has become such a convention-based business of traveling around the world and meeting new people and um, doing all of these conventions. Uh, and COVID has put a pause on all of that. When conventions start back up, how do you think they'll look? What will change?
well, for me, I mean, once I can get the vaccine, I think I'll be pretty much good to go.
Hmm.
I don't think I'm going to do anything because I'm in that sweet spot. If I get sick, it's curtains.
Hmm.
So I think I'll just wait, get the vaccine, and then get back out there. I think I'll be okay.
For sure. Do you think the process of conventions, of waiting in line, taking pictures, all of that kind of stuff, do you think that's going to change any, or do you think we'll
It
just go
might.
right back?
Ed Neal, who's the hitchhiker, he did one, and they did something where they were able to Photoshop. Or they did a way of shooting it that it looked like they were together, although they were separate.
Hmm.
There may be some kind of a plexiglass. I mean, it's terrible. What's that it's come down to this, but hopefully
Right.
things will get better if everybody just cooperates and wears a mask and distances and just does the right thing for the next 100 days or whatever, as our president
Yeah.
elect is want to say. And we get Orange Julius out of there. So
Right.
I think we'll be okay.
It's important for us to remember that it is patriotic to take care of our other citizens of America
Right.
and not patriotic to walk around without a mask on, endangering the lives of of everyone else around us.
Yeah.
Since it's been politicized whether or not you should wear a mask or not, patriotic to take care of the folks around you, not
I
to be
hope,
a jerk.
and for people that are interested in wanting to get like merchandise or whatnot, the official Texas Chain Saw Massacre website is a great website. They can go on there. They can, they can still see that the reunion. They can order
Mm.
T-shirts and all kinds of memorabilia. I have my own website, if I might mention,
Yes.
chainsawjerry.com, and soon to have an arrival of Chainsaw Jerry's talking bobbleheads, which Herbert Hoover, I think, wanted a chicken in every pot. I just like a bobblehead in every car on
There
the
you
dash.
go.
Good for laughs. No
Yeah, it's great for laughs. Chainsawjerry.com. You sell bobbleheads, autographed 8x10s,
T-shirts.
uh,
I've
t-shirts,
got T-shirts. Yeah,
everything to
all this-
meet your convention needs at
exactly.
home.
That's it. That's what I got.
Well, Alan, thank you so much. Right after we get done with this, I have to go to chainsawjerry.com and get my 8x10. Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it so much. This was
Same
an
here,
honor
and
for me.
actually, it's an honor. It's a privilege, talking to you. I mean, a young guy that's enamored of this movie. I mean, it makes me feel good. It's
Yeah.
what else is there? If you could get a laugh, make people smile, get a laugh, or scare them a little bit, and then get them to laugh, then it's all good.
That's
You have
the
a great
key
day.
to
Thanks
life.
a lot.